25 minutes to 8. We're told it'll be several weeks before we can be sure what caused Friday's crash on the M5 motorway in Somerset.
As you'll know, 37 vehicles were involved in that multiple pile-up near Taunton, leaving 7 people dead and 51 injured.
And among those who died, Tony and Pam Adams, the couple in their 70s, have been teenage sweethearts together for more than 50 years. Yesterday, their relatives went to a bridge overlooking the scene to pay their respects and to grieve. Just one of the families whose lives have now been changed irreversibly.
Well, how does a tragedy like this affect those who are left behind? Well, let's talk now to Gareth Jenkins. Gareth lost his father in a crash on the M6 in 2002, which left 4 people dead. Also here is Dr. Jennifer Wild, who's an expert in post-traumatic stress disorder. Thank you both for coming in.
Okay.
Gareth, as we were saying, you lost your dad in 2002.
That's
so
right.
you will have some idea of what the families of this dreadful crash on the M5 are going through at the moment.
Well, I did feel for them when I heard the news over the weekend. It's sometimes easy to forget when you hear of the numbers involved in these sort of incidents. I mean, it does happen too frequently, I think, on our roads, but it does have a big effect on the families involved. To lose someone, and not only you've got the emotional loss, but the strain it can put on a family when you lose your sole income, or you know, the sort of support base for your family. It was a very trying time for me and my family for several years after the accident.
Because it wasn't just the grief of losing your father, but also you had then to take over the family business.
Well, yeah, my mother stepped up to do that, never having run her own company before, certainly not worked in that industry. It was really the only option. She did very well, I think.
4 brothers and sisters all left in a very bad way with no father to raise them. It must have put an intolerable pressure on your mother, who's also going through grief as well.
Yeah, I think she did incredibly well to cope as she did. She kept us all in school and sent off the elders to university and kept it going. It was definitely not easy for her in the first few years after the accident, dealing with the grief alone, as you say, you know, then having to run a business. You know, my youngest sister was 8 at the time as well, so trying to raise young children as well as watch out for your teenage children through secondary school as well would have been very difficult.
Jennifer, grief is terrible for any family who loses a close person, but is it specifically worse for people who lose loved ones in particularly bad tragedies?
It's particularly difficult when it's unexpected, so it's always difficult when we lose a loved one, and we all go through it at some point in our lives. But when it's an illness, we have a little bit of a chance to prepare and to say things that we might want to say to the loved one. But when it's an accident, it's out of the blue, it's unexpected, there's so many things that are left unsaid, and we're left with so many questions. And often a key question that comes up that's really difficult is, could I have prevented this? Could I have had my family get together on another weekend, and maybe this, you know, these people wouldn't have died?
We were seeing pictures of relatives who were going onto the bridge to overlook the site where the crash happened. Is that helpful as part of the grieving process?
That's very helpful, particularly in terms of something like post-traumatic stress, which can develop after trauma like this. When we go through traumatic loss, we're much more likely to develop post-traumatic stress. So going back and looking at the scene and seeing how it's moved on, it's no longer a crash site and the car is driving through, it's going to be very helpful for the way the brain processes memory to see that things are moving on.
What sort of help did you and your family get after the accident?
Well, sort of immediately afterwards, we did get the opportunity to go to the scene of the accident. The police did a rolling roadblock for us, and we only had a few minutes, but we got to stop at the side of the road. They put a plaque there and they planted some daffodils. So
a lorry had crossed over from the other side.
That's right,
onto the
all
hard
6
shoulder.
lanes of the motorway from the other side. Had suffered a blowout, but he was also on his phone at the time, so it probably could have been prevented if he'd perhaps been paying slightly better attention. But also, Tapload Charity Foundation took me and my family on holiday to Disneyland in the months following. I think that was good to get away from it all and not to have to worry about school or you know, how you're going to get on afterwards.
Yes, exactly. I suppose, Jennifer, it's about making sure that the children are really protected and have things to look forward to.
That's right. They need things to look forward to, and the family needs to keep busy as well, not just with all the necessary things that happen after loss with the funeral arrangements, but with their everyday lives as well.
Gareth, you're a victim of another road accident since your father was killed.
That's right. Last year I got hit by a car when I was coming home on my motorbike. The driver was speeding and on the wrong side of a road coming around a corner. I didn't have very long to do anything about it. The last thing I remember was being hit by the car, but I suffered quite severe injuries in that. I broke my neck and back and both arms and shoulder, amongst other things. I've sort of been recovering the last year from that, but still walking about, so still getting on after that.
Yeah. And what happened to the driver of the vehicle that hit you?
He has since been to jail for dangerous driving. He received a 10-month sentence, although he only served 3 months of that. And I found out about his release because it was in a local newspaper, which I felt was probably not the best way for me to have found out about it. But you sort of learn with these things. You can't get too hung up on the details or the things you could have done differently, the many things that could have been different to prevent it from happening. You sort of have to concentrate on moving on and carrying on as best you can.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's 18 minutes to 8. This is Breakfast. These are the main stories this morning.